Welcome, everyone. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Welcome, everyone. Happy holidays, Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah. We'll get to the first item tonight, approval of the minutes, November 18th, 2013, regular meeting. Any objections?
I'll move that motion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion,
Oh, abstain, sorry.
one abstention, 4-0 it passes. We'll now move to the open forum. Please just state your name and address upon approach to the podium. Mr. Alba.
Al, I don't know if the mic's on. Hold on.
Okay,
Better.
that's better. Anyway, I was wondering if you consider what I said last time about that Homestead Act. It seems to me that is a good thing. That would keep the seniors here. When we're not having children. It won't cost us much to educate and all that. In Florida, there's no car tax, and we lose a lot of our citizens to go down there because they beat the taxes. So we lose that, plus we lose the senior citizens that go down there. So they're the ones that don't cost us anything. See, they're not having children. Everyone knows the biggest expense of the students in the schools.
Al, I'm happy to bring it to EDC to look at it again, because we had looked at it a few years, and there was a big study. But I can bring it back to that committee, and maybe they can honor that and take a look at it and bring it back if they think it makes sense for the town.
Right. Yeah, because I know lots of people, they do that, and we lose the taxes, and they don't pay any taxes by going to Florida. There's no car tax. So it's definitely is something to consider.
I'll see if I can get it on their agenda for you.
Right, thank you. Also, I know I'm rehashing the whole thing there, but what's happening with our bicycle path
We had an update in a while. Ms. Nolan has any new information?
I do. The DEM in Providence, Mr. DeLuca, our planner, and I went up and met with about 19 people representing federal and state agencies, including the Army Corps, U.S. Fish and Wildlife, State Fish and Wildlife, RIDOT, DEM, CRMC. I can't even think of the other. There was a room full of departments, both the state and federal government, and they are going to study all of the proposed paths and since they are funding it, they're going to get back to us and tell us the pros and cons on each proposed pathway. So right now, we are waiting for the state agency. I believe it's the Department of Transportation that is the lead agency. Is that correct, Mr. DeLuca? Yes. Yes. They're the lead agency. When they get back to us, Mr. DeLuca expects it'll be after the holidays. I expect it will be next year.
well, I hate to tell you how long this has been going on.
Well, they're in a good place. They're funding it. They're going to tell us what they think. But we have to be patient through that time
One thing
period.
would promote tourism. People like to
Absolutely.
ride bikes, and it's good for senior citizens. They can exercise and get them off the highway.
Can't agree with you more.
Right. Also, we should still consider that ice skating ring. I mean, you look at the news, Providence has it, Westerly has it. They're all over the place, but not in here in Narragansett, where we could have a nice spot for it, right where that stone Indian is, right up on the hill there. In fact, John Westerhauser mentioned that would be a good spot for an ice skating ring. So I think we should consider that. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Pam, I have a question about that bike path. Are they looking at just the one plan that we approved, or are they looking at all of them?
They're considering all of the paths that have been proposed to us. Mr. DeLuca, are there 4 or 5 paths? There were 5 in the original study. 5. And they're going to, I believe they're going to look at them all, correct?
They started with the endorsed path, the path endorsed by the town council, but they're looking at all of them.
I was under the impression that we just submitted that one plan there. And why do they have 5 now?
I don't have an answer to that. Do you, Mr. DeLuca?
The simple answer, Doug, is that the state and the Fed are financing the entire development. And while they understand that the town endorsed a particular route, they're willing to look at that route, and they're going to put a price on it, an estimated cost on that. But they want to see this path done just as much as we do, and they know that there were other alternatives proposed in a feasibility study back in the early 90s and then again in year 2000. And so I believe they have not abandoned, from their perspective, any of those alternatives as being potential.
That's the plans that they received. They were prior to the plans that we reviewed,
Yes.
just up to the time we made our decision on that one plan to forward it.
That's
We
right.
didn't forward any other plans there, did we?
No, we did not.
So it was stuff they had from, historically, from years back.
That's correct.
So we kind of like wasted all our time talking about that plan.
Yeah, I thought that we had said that we had a preferred path through the farm, and then there was the alternative path, and that because they were doing their study, they were going to look at the one that was the least environmentally destructive to Canachet Farm.
Well,
Because I think if the path takes one of the other routes, I don't know if people want that path.
well, their approach is.
Is that what you're getting at, Doug?
That's exactly what I'm getting
I mean,
at.
I think the thing was, the sentiment was, there was 2 paths, and for lack of a better word, there was the Brady path, and there was the Canachet Farm path, and we declared a preference, but from all my discussions with Chief Hoxie when he was sitting in your seat, and with Rich, and not with you yet, but in my understanding of it was, as Doug is getting at, that there was one, that would Canachet Farm go through Canachet Farm. That was the general sentiment, that was the general vote, and there was a preferred path there. But if it goes outside of Canachet Farm, I mean, I don't think that that's what we would want.
We did all the filtering and came down with a decision, and now I guess they're right back to square one again if they're reviewing other projects. And it's taken so long, too. I've had some inquiries just this past week about it, and quite frankly, I didn't know what its status was. Somebody told me it was with the Department of Transportation, which didn't seem right to me.
It's always been a DOT project, right
It
from the
still
beginning.
is? It still is?
Yes.
Well, how is DEM reviewing the 5 projects in coastal resources?
Well, as Ms. Nolan stated, DEM is one of the many agencies at the table doing the review. The meeting that was held about a month ago brought all the permitting agencies together, and they discussed the numerous barriers and obstacles that they may have to hurdle in order to pursue the path orientation that the town did endorse. So that, when you put 17 agencies together in one room, leads to tangential discussion, which they did have, but they are, I'm certain that they truly appreciate that the town has one preferred orientation, and that they are going to put a great deal of effort into analyzing that first.
So, Mike, at the conclusion of the review, though, will it come back to us? Because we want to be clear about, we spent a lot of time, and I agree with my colleagues up here, about the path that we endorsed. So it will be completely different if they end up with a different path. So at the conclusion of the review, if it comes back, then we have some decisions to make too, right?
I don't think they will go forward at all until they've run by this council the number of alternatives, however many they want to consider, and the conceptual cost estimates that they have developed, as well as the permitting, the list of permitting hurdles that need to be had. So no, I'm certain that DOT is not moving forward until they've passed on to us their guidance and have sought out some response from this council.
Thanks.
And Mike,
Maybe
it's fair.
as a-
Sorry, go ahead, Doug.
As a recommendation, Pam, maybe we should put that as an agenda item instead of taking up all our open forum time in a couple of weeks and find out what its status is.
We can do that.
And Mr. DeLuca, just for information purposes, this project is not funded by the town.
That's
The
right.
town has no real financial stake in it, but the federal and state government has to pay for it. And if I'm not correct, please do correct me, the funding for this kind of project right now is limited.
That's true.
And
There were earmarked funds set forth a long time ago. I wish I could tell you how many years. At one time, there was a little over $1 million left in that earmark. That money has been depleted by a number of different repairs that they've done on different parts of the existing bike path. So it's, as I understand it, there's less than $1 million left. And we do have, as you might recall, the town did submit a request for TIP funding to supplement the funding available. That's still at the study level. It's still under study at the state level is what I'm trying to say.
thank you very much. Mr. Brady?
Patrick Brady, 156 Boston Neck Road, Narragansett. I'd like to give you a little different perspective on the situation and the status of the bike path. It's been 4 years since the review committee recommended that the bike path go through Canachet Farm. 4 years. All right. On October 31st, as the town manager mentioned, DOT had an interagency meeting, and these are the minutes of that meeting. And I would like to quote 5 sentences from this meeting, which will give you a pretty clear view of what our problem is. Number 1, Mike Elliott expressed reservation regarding the ability of the Seaview option to meet ACOE's and CWA Section 4004 guidelines for avoidance and minimization of impact due to the availability of other feasible alternatives. This is the Army Corps of Engineers basically saying that this route is not feasible. Second, there was some discussion of possibly incorporating the Sprague Park area and including a spur along the existing southern portion of the rail bed. So again, now because they don't have a good feasible route, they are now going backwards and trying to find out, okay, where can we find a feasible route? Number 3, RIDOT asked about the possibility of exploring Riverside Drive as a way to help meet this part of the town's objective. In other words, reviewing the marsh. Again, DOT sees the route recommended by the town is not feasible. They are now backstepping. They have to backstep. They're looking for a feasible route. Number 4, RIDOT's next step will be to produce a feasibility study, and it is apparent that this document will need to include the range of alternatives which have been presented in previous studies, including on-road options. So now we are going back 4 years. And finally, Mr. DeLuca indicated that he was not aware that there were any formal restrictions on bicycle usage of the local roads. Mr. DeLuca had been a proponent of going around the farm for 4 years. So based on this meeting, DOT's backpedaling. It's not just 5 routes now that they're going to review. There were 5 routes recommended in 2000 by DOT that they analyzed. There were 4 routes submitted to DOT in 2012 by Mr. DeLuca. So that's 9 routes. There were also 3 additional routes submitted to the DOT by this council, recommending the Seaview Railroad as their first recommendation. So they are now going to review not 5, not 3, not 1, 12 routes. Now, this is not happening in a vacuum. South Kingston, through Teresa Tansey, has been lobbying heavily for the funds reserved for Narragansett to be used for new South Kingston bike path spurs, maintenance of the South Kingston path, and $1 million for a rest area in the middle of Wakefield for the bike path. The money is being stolen from the chicken coop because this town has waited 4 years and delayed 4 years of getting a feasible plan to DOT to review.
Mr. Brady, your time's up.
I have been shut off for 4 years, and I've got a couple more statements I'd like to put on the record, if I may.
You could speed it along a little bit. Thanks.
If this council does not notify DOT that they are not wedded to the Seaview route, then the Friends of Conatchett route, and that alternate A, going near the South County Museum, is acceptable, the bike path through the farm will fail, and it will be on this council's watch and at this council's hands. I note for the record that in 2011, the council recommended route through the farm over the vote of Glenna Hagopian, then president of the town council. No plan was submitted to DOT for 12 months after it was recommended to be sent.
Mr. Brady, this is all historical. I mean, what are we going to get out of this right now? It's not going to get us anywhere. I mean, we submitted the plan. They're studying it. I know you have debates over the feasibility of the current plan that we submitted, but we're doing the best we can. What else can we do?
You need to send a letter to DOT saying that you're not wedded to one plan, one that is not feasible.
I don't think a preferred plan is set in stone. We sent up a plan that a majority of us approved, with the full knowledge that it would likely be amended, and the possibility that your plan, your ideas, would be incorporated in the plan that came out in the future. We're not wedding ourselves to anything.
I had a meeting with the former interim town manager, and when DOT asked, how wedded are you to this? And the town manager sent him a letter. We are wedded to it completely. We're married to it. So that statement is just not what DOT sees from this town. DOT sees this town saying that the ad hoc Seaview Friends of Conatchett route is the only route that they will entertain. And until you give them better information, this bike path is going to die, and it's going to run out of money. That's all I had to say. It's a shame. 4 years or a lot of work going in this, and I'm afraid you're going to lose it.
Thank you. Mr. Traeger.
Good evening. Well, I've actually put a couple of notes down. I hope I'm able to follow them. I'd like to make a couple of points, and that's about it. On the, and I don't know which way to start, so that's my way I go. Anyway, what I hope in my heart is that over the period of time, I'm 74 now, I'm just a kid, hope to develop like a trusting relationship with my people that serve the public, like you do. I believe that trust, even though we have these very important words, liberty, truth, justice, and whatever, they are all based on the word trust. Without trust, we would collapse. Trust is the foundation of a democratic way of life. And when it erodes, we all lose. And right now, I will tell you that my trust, and it's all not because of you five people up there. There's a lot going on in this country and the world that also adds to the spiraling lack of trust that I'm beginning to have on our ability, and as this gentleman just kind of alluded to the same thing, time and delay on things that shouldn't take more than a year at least, at the most, and we belabor these things. And the sewer project in Jerusalem is going on for over 5 years. Okay, a 3-2 vote. 2 people so chose to dissent on the vote and apparently realized that it was the thing to do. I missed the meeting. I'm almost glad I did. I don't know. It would have been a tough meeting to listen to. Right after that meeting, just within a week, I received a letter from the town. Jeff wrote it. In that letter, there's a statement that this project is effectively canceled. Well, here's the way I look at that. You've probably all heard this phrase before, but I believe the town has washed its hands as far as helping the people of Jerusalem. And I mean it. I think you've washed your hands a long time ago about not helping the people in Jerusalem. You did a lot of things. Somebody did a lot of things. Maybe you felt you had to do them. You sent a survey out. 3978, it turns out. 78 people know they need this down there. I wonder what the EPA would think of your decision. I want to say, I don't want to run out of time. I hope you give me a couple extra seconds too, because I've only got a couple of things to say. Tell me the rationale for your decision. That's all I ever ask way from the beginning. If you're making a decision, give me the rationale for it. And I don't want you to give it to me now. I want to ask these questions, for a couple of questions first. Is there a better way to solve the environmental problems in Jerusalem? Nobody's answered that question. Nobody. It's a simple question. The way I see it is lip service has been paid to this project. For some reason, people were supporting it. They told me, eyeball to eyeball, you know, this is a good thing, it's the way it should be done and everything. And then behind the scenes, this is what I believe personally. I can't prove it, but behind the scenes, behind, as we hear it, closed doors, this project was being undermined. I think many of the things that were asked and stated in letters to our community were meant to undermine it. But it didn't work. The people said, 78 people, we want it. I'm going to divert for a second, if you give me one more. I'm doing this for a reason, and I hope you'll appreciate the reason, if you, or at least try to understand it. There's a word I'm going to ask you, have you heard it? Affluenza. Have you ever heard the word? You're a lawyer. Have you heard the word? Recently, that word was used to defend a murderer. This is what affluenza means. I'm laughing because it's so repugnant that I don't know what else to do. If a child is spoiled to the point where they don't know the difference between right and wrong is the basics behind it. And a young 16-year-old boy driving under twice or more than twice the influence of liquor killed 4 people. 2 of them were a member of a family. I listened to the father speak on the television last night. That's one thing. Affluenza. How far down the road are we going to go to allow the rich and the money in this country to take what they want and do what they want and get what they want. And that's basically what that affluenza means to me. The other thing is, I watch C-SPAN a lot, and they do book things on the weekends. And a gentleman, doesn't make any difference what his name is, has just done a tremendously detailed research study of the government's national, local, and the states and everything, who are the people that are running this government. Only 2% of the politicians in this country come out of the working class. Only 2%. And the reason that they're not in the government has nothing whatsoever to do with their ability to do the job. Their ability and their judgment is there. In fact, they could fill every single public office hundreds of times. There are that many working class people that are capable of doing the work. So why don't they do it? Well, it took about an hour for that question to be asked of the person that wrote the book, or did this research. And basically it's two things. It's money and time. Money and time. People that have the money and the time get the influence. And you guys have the influence. And you guys, I do not believe, have exercised your duties as public servants. And I am very disappointed in what has happened. This is the one, and this is the last thing I'll say. I could go on because I got a lot of stuff here but it's so what? It doesn't mean anything. That's the whole thing. It doesn't mean anything. A guy like Mr. Alba gets up here every week. I have the highest respect for him. And he says things to you guys, and you guys listen, and you don't take one bit of it into your, maybe you have over the years. I'm not going to say that because Mr. Alba's been doing it over the years. But I don't believe you take too much in. And a skating rink is a good idea. The people that opposed the thing in Jerusalem are 39, and most of them put their own systems in. Not one of them was at the meeting on December 2nd. And I personally believe that they had a lot to do with the decision-making of this group in front of me. And I cannot tell you how they did it, but I know they did it because if they thought there was a slightest possibility, they would have had representation here at that meeting. So everything's done, everything's it's all set. Well, congratulations.
Thank you. Mr. Wojciechowski.
I want to speak to the money crisis. The census said that American men who work full-time year-round earned less in real terms in 2012 than they did in 1976. The real median household income was lower in 2012 than in 1989. Real median household has fallen 5.7% since 2008. I think this all speaks to a money crisis, and I want you to participate in this money crisis. The federal government, I think last year, said it was appropriate just to allow us seniors to get 1.7% increase in our paycheck. Yet I hear on a 5-year plan that we may be close to 4% increases. Not acceptable. Not acceptable. I would like to see immediately hiring freeze. When I saw that finance director ad in the paper, I get a little upset, of course, and you're addressing that. I can hear you addressing that. One finance director for the town is obvious, and you must start there. It's a small step, but it's a message. We must start there. We shall not have two finance directors in this town. So I commend you for looking at that, but I want you to complete that and have that happen. I also heard something about a surplus or $550,000 from settlements, whatever. Those funds shall be returned to the taxpayer. Any kind of surplus is nothing but excess money collected. Maybe they shouldn't have been. So return it to the taxpayer. That should be used to reduce the possibility of any tax increase over this 1.7 or any figure that the federal government comes up with. I'm going to trust the federal government. When they say there's a cost of living increase of 1%, that's where I want you to be at. I think that's fair. Whatever that's the number. Let's not skew that. The town should not, they should pay attention to that. And that's your goal. That's where you start. That makes you, start your negotiation, start your thinking. Have everyone in the town, all the department managers, start their thinking. We're looking at maybe a 1% increase. Yeah. And with the surplus we have, maybe there should be no increases for a couple of years. Thank you.
Thank you. Without any further comment in the open forum, move on to the consent agenda. Anyone have any items they'd like to remove? Motion on the consent agenda?
I'll make that motion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries 5-0. Moving on to old business number 11, a motion to adopt a resolution approving the Narragansett Beach season fees for the 2014 season.
I'll move that motion.
Second.
Discussion? Yes, sir, in the scarf.
My name's Jerry Pryor. I have been a cabana leaseholder for over 50 years. My understanding is that you wish to raise the cabana fees from $750 to $2,500. Now, I don't know whose idea that was, but think to yourself, you all are homeowners, you all have families. Would you like your taxes to go up between 30 and 40%? I think it's patently unfair for you to raise that. I understand you'll need a raise, but that type of raise is unfair. I don't know if you've decided upon that or you're going to discuss it, but that's all I have. What I lack in eloquence, I make up for it with brevity.
Thank you. Mr. Wojciechowski.
At the work session there was a resident stood up, and I think he made sense, a lot more than me even. And the beach fees, I think the daily beach fees had the biggest impact. I guess that was the largest value. And I guess you're going from 6 to 8%. And I thought at the time that might have been acceptable. But now, after giving some thought, we really should double that number. 6 city went to 12. We should double the number.
Stan, you wanted 8, and now you move the number up on us again.
I
We
listened.
give you what you
What
want.
happened is I responded to the work session. At the work session, I think there was a man smarter than me, and he brought up that if we had less people at the beach, it would be a plus for the town to have less. And of course, Jeff mentioned that the biggest bucks came for the daily numbers. So I'm going to hit the daily numbers now, and I'm going to say I want to double that from 6 to 12. We should have really done that. This guy was right. He had a point to be made, and I'm going to go along and support that. And I want you to do that. You know, and for the cabana fees, that should have doubled also, because just the fact alone that the long list of people shows you that we're too low, and the beach funds are in trouble. It's non-sustainable as it is. Therefore, we must increase fees. So the daily fees and the cabana fees are not high enough. They need to be higher.
Thank you. Mr. Alba.
Well, I usually agree with Stan, but I just cannot go along with this. I mean, we don't want to discourage people coming to our beaches. We want to bring them in. That's where our revenue comes from. I mean, maybe someday we'll have a pier, so we can call Narragansett Pier a pier, which it is. I mean, that pier could be built. I mean, I had the newspaper there showing the 100-year anniversary, showing the pier built. And this was a tourist attraction of the whole East Coast, more than Newport, Westerly. But we got to have money there to do these things. So think about it.
You know, Mr. Alba makes an interesting point. I've got a lot of calls since the work session that we had about what the beach is. And we got in our packet, in our mail, and we might have gotten it earlier, although I don't get my mail as frequently as maybe some of you did, a memo from Parks and Recreation about the fact that we were commending Steve for doing such a great job in light of the fact that the state beaches had had such a drop-off in revenue. And despite that, that Narragansett had done so well in terms of revenue. And yet, the calls I received were, geez, should we really be, and I know everyone will probably be sort of scratching their head saying, is Hagopian actually saying this, but should we really be aspiring to just raise money? Because a lot of the people in the town say they don't enjoy the beach. They don't go to the beach because they don't enjoy the beach, because we're giving it away, and that's why everyone goes to Narragansett Beach, because it's so cheap, and that it's not enjoyable because it's tons of tourists and it's people parking free on the seawall and walking to the beach. So I had raised it in the workshop. The question is, should we have the strategic discussion about, is the beach the asset of the town and we should aspire to make it easy and cheaper, more enjoyable for the residents of the town, and make the people that come here to enjoy it from elsewhere, recognizing fully this is a resort community, we want to attract people, but make them pay for it? Or do we want to kick the can down the road and continue to just check the fees and ratchet it up every year, a little bit by a little bit? I actually don't use the beach. I don't go to it that frequently here. I can't necessarily, express an opinion necessarily. I think it's a great operation. I think Steve does do a great job. I think revenue is a great idea, but I think we should listen to the constituency who says, I don't like it. I don't go because I don't, I wish I could go and enjoy it. And can I just make one other comment? And with all due respect to the cabana holder, please don't take this the wrong way. I've gotten a lot of feedback from folks who say, who do those cabana people think they are? They don't own these units. These are assets of the town. And so despite the fact that they may have been there for multiple generations, for them to express a property interest or a sense that they own these things as though they're their own property is somewhat discriminatory. And wouldn't it be great if all the people in the community have access to these things on a much more rotational basis at perhaps a much cheaper rate, so that everybody could enjoy the asset similar to how you have?
Mr. Brady?
I would just like to second the suggestion that the town have a workshop on the beach properties before any further major financial work is done there. I think the town needs that workshop. A week and a half ago, you had a work session with the Recreation Department. It was an hour and a half long. The residents there were not handed any of the data that you discussed in that meeting. So we were basically blind. It was an hour and a half meeting. You left 10 to 12 minutes for people to ask questions or make a statement to the council. I think you are shortchanging the people of this town. And I think it needs to be opened up before we make bigger and bigger mistakes at the beach. Short-term thinking, I'm afraid that's where we're at right now. We need to think long-term. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Rocchio? Let's get a comment to the mic.
Actually, Glenna, that was really
State
well.
your name and address, please.
Maria Rocchio, 30 Rose Court. Actually, that was kind of an interesting statement you just made, because that really kind of, a lot of us do feel that way. But I also understand that Steve also kind of needs to move things along so that he can put the website up. And so maybe looking at, like, for, giving him the go-ahead for this year would be, now, am I understanding correctly that we raise the fees for those out-of-towners that rent the South Cabana? Am I right about that?
The lockers.
The lockers.
We haven't raised any fees yet, Maria.
The proposal is
That's what we're talking about, yeah.
They're all raised, though.
The
if we go-
proposal is $450 to $600 for the lockers.
Well, to me, that's a start. So, like, I feel bad holding the rec department up. And believe me, I do want to see some change. So I think that at least what I would love to go along with that is, the non-sharing of the lockers. My biggest issue with the whole beach thing is really the parking. And so, we really sell a lot of out-of-town resident stickers, like $450, am I right? Right? For around $450. So I would love for the rec department to do maybe a little more like this year, collect some data to use for next year. So we, you have to remember that those vendors that come in, I mean, they need a population at the beach. So I understand the economic end of having, that happy medium, but I would love to know, like, when those out-of-towners are utilizing the beach. Is it Saturday and Sunday when it's most, that's when we have off, and so it's such a hassle to go, like, between 11 and 2 is, like, ridiculous. You can't go to the beach between 11 and 2. You won't get a parking spot, and so when you have children and elderly people, that's, that, as a town resident, I mean, that's where my taxes go, and, we want to be able to go to the beach. So, I would love to see some changes, like, like maybe offer a Monday through Friday, sticker. And that way, the lot isn't full then. Just maybe start feeling out some avenues that we can take, still bringing in the revenue, still making the townspeople happy, and just trying to see, when those out-of-town or non-residents are using the beach. So my recommendation to Steve was to, maybe barcode the guest stickers for the car. Just a simple bar on the top, they can be green, and then a little white bar for the guest, the non-resident sticker. And then that way we could collect a little bit of data to know what we're talking about. Is it really just all of us going to the beach at the same exact time? Or are these non-residents really taking up all those spots at prime time? So again, I mean, I feel badly for the rec department. They really need to kind of move things along. And I applaud your, efforts so far. And that's just my thoughts.
Thank you. Ms. Rogers.
Merry Christmas. Good evening. Meg Rogers, 68 Earls Court, Narragansett. First of all, I want to thank Steve Wright for all his hard work in the rec department. He does a tremendous job at the beach, and he and his team are to be commended for that always. I believe we have truly lost our way in a very significant sense. We must not keep raising beach fees because that's the way we have always done it. But precisely because that's the way we've always done it, we have to stop doing it. This is precisely what is wrong with our government. If the Narragansett Town Beach exists solely as a revenue source for our town, why not raise the daily fee to $15 or $20? I actually cringe when I hear some of my fellow citizens, though well-intentioned, say that the beach needs to be for the residents, and we need to keep those people who live in other places or other parts of our state off, quote, our beach. As a taxpayer and someone who was drawn to this beautiful little town because of its beach, I would say the beach is not for my exclusive benefit. Of course, we must protect it, but we have lost our way when it comes to how much we pay to walk on our beach. Now, this council 2 weeks ago knighted James Kavanaugh, who served in our school committee, a man I didn't know personally, but I know his legacy was one that he defended Rhode Islanders' constitutional rights to access the shoreline. We have drifted so far from that, I can't even articulate it properly. I do have a question. Am I correct that we are one of the few places in the state of Rhode Island who charge to park and to walk onto a beach? We are. Do we have any number or data as to how many other towns charge both to walk onto a beach and to park at a beach? No? Okay, but I don't know of any. So a cursory examination of some of the beaches in the neighboring state of Massachusetts show us that our beach fees are actually astronomically high. Some of the most exclusive communities on Cape Cod, Chatham, Osterville, the town of Barnstable, Gloucester, Massachusetts. Do you know what their rates are? Full-time residents pay $20 a year for a sticker. Well, we pay $25, I realize, but no parking fee. Non-resident property owners, $20. Stationed Armed Forces service member, $20. We absolutely need a comprehensive beach policy because we have so many inconsistencies that it's incomprehensible. There's no consideration given to our veterans, disabled or otherwise, in our beach fees. This is appalling, and I know you want to address that. A senior citizen yet, living in South Kingstown, can access our beach all season long for less than the cost of 2 clam rolls at Monahan's for the whole season, $20. We must put a stop to this, because you know, and everyone here knows, that once you raise the fee, you will never lower them. And I ask you to please just stop and wait until you can think this through, do some strategic thinking, as Glenna has asked, and give some comprehensive and serious consideration to what our beach means as a public asset. And one last thing, it's been asserted here tonight and at the workshop that we give our beach away. I don't understand this, because for a family of 4, not living in Narragansett, but let's say visiting at my next door neighbor, okay? So she has a son serving in the military and a son-in-law serving in the military. When they come visit her, it's $47 for a family of 4 with 2 children over the age of 12 to access our beach. Please wait on this, please. Once you raise them, you'll never lower them.
This was extensively vetted through the Recreation Advisory Board. They went through their own process and came up with the rates recommended to raise on all different parts of the beach fees. Personally, I think the beach is one of the most rare things we have because there's very few municipal functions that actually make or have the potential to make money. I can't think of many other things like that in the country even. So I think we have to maximize, in some respects, the money we make there because it can provide a revenue source that other towns don't have. So it's a benefit to us, and we have to utilize that to make sure we can afford the beach plus some other things. So it's an asset.
So I just want to say, we've been all over the place on this beach issue. Originally, I was not supporting at all any increases. We have a workshop. It wasn't really well attended. At that workshop, we heard that we sort of came up with some increases. I, too, received some calls with people that want to know what the balance of the beach is and what's the philosophy behind what we want to do down at the town beach. You know, I am a beach goer. I'm there every day in the summertime, and I see the residents, and I know how much it means to them, and it is truly the gem of this community. So for me, as much as when I heard in the workshop, you know, in the Park and Rec, all talked about it, I also heard some other people saying, we want to enjoy it, we don't want it to be too expensive. So, you know, to Glenna's point about what are we doing for the beach? You know, what do we want? Do we want to cater to the residents? Do we want to be neighborly and balance that? So I'm kind of in the middle here now thinking I've never really wanted to support increases for the residents too high because I want them to enjoy it daily like I do. So I'm kind of in the middle because I thought they were good increases, but again, we go round and around. So for me, if we could wait on this and really spend a little more time on it, I might feel better. That's just my thought.
The thing with the philosophy is, no matter how you think about it, whether you want it to be a resident-oriented beach or a visitor beach, there's still going to be fees. And no council is ever going to agree on a philosophy that goes forward forever. It just has to be what you think at that time. That's my philosophy, because we could say we want it to be just residents, and then that changes in a year or two. I mean, I understand that we have to maybe make a philosophy, but I don't think that's going to happen. I don't think it's a long-term thing that we can dictate for perpetuity.
Look at the cabanas.
Which part of it?
The fact that they've just stayed the way they are forever.
Hopefully not.
But you know what I'm saying?
Right.
I mean, that has persisted forever.
I just don't think it's been addressed.
Exactly, right? So, I mean, I think that no one's really ever made a decision about the strategy, right? It was created as an enterprise. You make the point, James, that it makes money, but it makes money to sustain itself. And at the end of the day, it really only sustains itself. It pays pilot money back to the town for services it receives from the town. It's not as though it necessarily is an additional revenue generator for the town. Well, so, I mean, it brings tourism, it benefits local economy. We can't take away from that. It's definitely a draw. It should be for the town, I mean, for the benefit of the town's people, and we love to have, you know, the tourism and the principles of that. The question is, how do we want people to use it? What do we want to continue to improve the properties the way we do? Do we want them more improved? Do we want them to be more rustic? Do we want concessions? Do we want private areas and public areas? Do you know what I mean? There's no real strategy here. Nobody's ever, and again, I'm not suggesting that it would persist forever, but I would suggest the conversation's never been had.
I think we should have the conversation, but I don't know if tonight's the night to have it. That's what I'm saying. I mean, I think that what Ms. Rocchio said, over the course of the year, this year, maybe we should look at it in a different way than we have, but whether tonight's the night to do it, I don't think that's the case.
And people in town do feel that we need to focus more on making the beach for the townspeople. That was pretty consistent a year and a half ago when I started this adventure. And I think, for me, I guess that would be my guiding principle at the beach. But I don't think we're going to solve every fee increase or every value there in one fell swoop. I can honestly say that's kind of my priority, to make it more for the townspeople. But then we did have these work sessions, went through this. We did have some recommendations, whether we table them, which I'm comfortable with, whether we take some of them in right now, because actually I have questions, you know, we had recommendations, and I think it was vetted, as James said. This has been vetted. between the cabana work session and then the beach fee work session. So, my general sentiment is, we want to keep it for the townspeople. That's why I advocated to go from 6 to 8 on the non-residents. I know some don't agree with me on that. But in the end, that was, I think we do need to have a strategic discussion about what we want out of the beach. So.
Mr. Vangerbish.
Clearly this is an old refrain, and until you people treat the beach as you would and as you should as a business, and until somebody in town decides to make sensible business decisions about the beach, this will go on year after year after year, as it probably has gone on since the town has the beach. There never has been a treatment of the beach as it should be in the private sector. If this were, you people, if you owned the beach and you were the board of directors, you would not talk as you do now. The board of directors is interested in the long-run viability of a valuable revenue-producing asset. And the goal then is over a 10 and 20 and 30-year period. This is what people do in the private sector. And we're devoid of thinking like we do in the private sector. In the private sector, you look for the long term. The long term is 10, 15, and 20 years. It is impossible under our current government structure to think of anything over maybe 6 months until somehow we find a way to do this. This babble, if you will, and I don't say it disrespectfully, about the long term will continue on forever. The only thing we do in the long term here is babble in the short term of how nice it would be to do something in long-term planning. Believe me, the private sector has long since solved this problem. There are long-term budget, long-term planning committees on private board of directors that make these decisions. And until we are willing to do this, we will never be successful. We have to, it is an enterprise fund, and it should have the same planning that that beach would have if owned by a private company. And I guess the Bonnet Shores Beach Club would be a private company. I'm sure the Bonnet Shores Beach Club might be a benchmark institution here for us, because I think they don't talk about the next season. Yes, they talk about it, but they talk about the next season in the long-term scheme of the things, which may be as much as 15 to 20 years. Heavens forbid the private sector does this.
Thank you. Mr. Chorney.
Good evening. I'm not here as my role as chair of the Finance Committee, but strictly as a taxpayer. I agree a lot with what's been said tonight, to what Richard said, but one of the things that I don't hear is we talk about this in terms of philosophy of town versus, non-residents. One of the things that concerns me is what I don't hear is what's the plan to preserve this beach. This beach has changed a lot over the last 40 years, and it's going to continue to change. And I'm not talking about people or anything else, just the size. So what I don't see is what this town is doing to preserve the beach. The other thing that I would say is that one of the words that comes in front of the beach is the word town. This is not a state beach, and I'm not suggesting at all that we limit this to town residents. I don't think we could do that anyhow. But the point is, I would say philosophically, I would like to see this beach really be not only for town, mostly, primarily for town residents. We pay for the infrastructure. We pay to maintain that beach as taxpayers. Yes, we do charge fees to pay for that. I mean, there's a way in terms of the revenue side of this where you can continue to make, I think, as much as you're making. by raising the fees potentially on non-residents. Yes, you may have to do it for residents a little bit, but make it, charge a little higher fees for non-residents. Charge for parking along Route 1, where you're losing, the town is losing a lot of money off that road. I recognize it's a state road, but my understanding is that conversations have been had in the past where we could charge. The state wouldn't mind if we charge for that. The fact is, even though there is a lot that's being paid by residents and non-residents in particular, probably because they don't always have to pay for parking. And by the way, a lot of people get here, if you're there at 8 o'clock in the morning, there's a lot of people on the beach before 8:30 in the morning when the people who are working there to collect look for badges. So I guess I would just suggest a couple of things. I would like to see the town council, one, as part of the strategic thinking, how are you going to preserve the beach? And then philosophically, what is the beach there for? Who is it there for? It is for town residents. It is for non-residents also, but I would like to see the emphasis put on town residents. Can't exclude the non-residents. I agree with that. But there is a way to keep on generating the revenue and still minimize the impact on that beach. Thanks.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Good evening. My name's Ellen Menachia. I live at 34 Julia Ave. Glenna, I never thought we'd agree on anything, but I completely agree with you on this issue. And the reason I say that is because I think that, first of all, as long as this is an enterprise fund, we'll never get any revenue. That the point of this whole enterprise fund is to sustain itself. Is that correct? So when we talk revenue, it's a moot point because this isn't a money-making thing at this point for Narragansett. Is that correct? Okay. So I think when we talk about the future, and I think when we talk about where we are financially as a town, I think that we can potentially make this more of a revenue situation if we relook at it as an enterprise fund, or maybe create a separate fund for revenue-making situation. Like, first of all, why don't we charge after 5 o'clock? Everybody and their brother is parking in that parking lot after 5 o'clock. That's a great way to make money. And this is something we can invest, and this is something we can put back into the town so that we won't be worried and be at our wits' end about the fact that we don't have any money for the future for this town. It's a great money-making situation we have here. We're not taking advantage of it. Now, we talk about the fact that we want this for potentially use for other people other than the residents. I think that the gentleman that spoke prior to myself made a great point. This beach is getting smaller and smaller. I don't know if any of you went to the beach this year. You couldn't move. It was like ants. It's because we're losing beach property, erosion. We have to take that into account when we consider the non-residents. And again, my final point, because I'm going back and forth here. First of all, I think we can make more money on the beach. Second of all, I think we have to consider the residents. And the third point I'm making is parking. I really think we have to consider the non-residents and the residents in terms of who's going to get priority parking. So I think that needs to be part of our strategic planning as well. Thank you so much. I hope I made some sense.
Thank you. Yes, sir, in the back.
My name is Larry DeMichael. I live in 60 Crosswinds Drive in the north end of Narragansett. I'm sorry for my late arrival, so I will preface my remarks with not knowing what was conducted prior. I was at a previous meeting. During a recent workshop session, most residents commented about the beach being severely crowded and the beach experience being degraded by the influx of non-residents. My remarks echoed those sentiments. At the meeting, Ms. Hagopian asked about the strategic vision for the beach and what goals and objectives the town was trying to reach as stewards for this spectacular natural resource. I and others asked that the town council increase non-resident fees to at least 2 times the resident numbers. With the exception of one category, the non-resident fees have remained the same in the proposal you will put forth tonight. That seems very counter to the request of those attending the last meeting. The Narragansett Town Beach is the jewel in the crown of our town. It is regularly overcrowded and ecologically stressed to a degree that is unhealthy for the future and certainly uncomfortable for town residents to enjoy. The reluctance to understand that overcrowding and the subsequent damage being done is very unfortunate and will not bode well for future generations. I will ask you again to please reconsider your options for out-of-town admission and parking fees. Attending our beach is a privilege that should be enjoyed first by our residents and then secondly by others who choose to pay the fees that make sense for us to run an efficient and well-planned operation. The goal should not be to sell to as many admissions or parking places in one day to fill the beach with non-residents. Thank you.
Thank you. A recap?
So looking at the Park and Rec recommendations and the directives, I was just wondering if we could keep in mind, Glenna's idea about the strategic planning and maybe modify this in a way tonight where we could accept some of it. So I'm going to propose to the rest of the council maybe we had talked about increasing the daily rate from 6 to 8. We had kind of agreed and talked about that. Non-resident senior pass plus 65. We had talked about 600 to 700 for the north, and we had talked about the transferable pass, so we had agreed about that. Some of these recommendations were agreed to by the Park and Rec Committee as well, so it's sort of a combination. And the last one is the increase of the cabana from 17 to 25. So those are from the director, from the workshop, from Park and Rec. And so in looking at that, I still think, as Glenna had said at the workshop, that we do need to be friendly to our neighbors and allow other people to come to the town and use the beach, but we also want to think about what we want for the residents of this town. So I think the daily increase for the non-resident was something we had talked about at that workshop. So I'm going to propose those 5, really 4 plus the transferable pass, which we had agreed upon long ago, and see if people could at least agree to that tonight with a plan to set up a future strategic meeting on what we're going to be doing at the beach. I don't know how everybody else feels about that.
Yeah, those are the ones that we have that have gone kind of through the process, that we may have heard from constituents and may not like what happened 2 weeks ago, but that was basically what Steve brought before us, and those things were discussed and the rationale behind each of those. So the raise from 6 to 8 for the people walking on, basically what we call the walk-ons, the transferable pass going to 200, and then my understanding on the lockers 600 to 700, the rationale, just so everyone knows, was because some had showers and some didn't at some point, but now all do not. Is that correct? Okay, and then obviously the 1750 to the 2500, that was for the 10-year payback associated with that, which we may want to hold and have as part of the discussion with the rebuild, right? But that was what's been discussed. It's gone through the Recreation Committee, which Mario served on, and then Parks and Rec gave us the work session, just so everyone kind of knows where those 4 changes come from, and they've been vetted. There are a couple other ones on the blue sheet that I think we should maybe hold, because this would be the 300 to 350, Steve, and the 450 to 600. Yeah, but we didn't really talk about that. I'm just saying I don't feel comfortable till we talk through it. That's where I am.
The only thing is, we had said if we were going to make an increase, it was going to be moderate for all of them, so that we weren't just increasing one area and not another. So that was discussed. I do remember that, because I wanted to be fair and equitable. If everybody was going to feel a slight increase, we were going to try to do it to
well, maybe we should separate these if some are comfortable with others. I just feel like the others got a lot more airtime in the work session.
I think he's right as far as more time. But
I just don't feel that was vetted as much.
We did discuss them, didn't we? We
did.
Yeah. I have one question which isn't on here, but just given a forward agenda item, we haven't talked about it. So if the cabanas do not get reconstructed, and in light of the fact that there is a parking issue we've heard about, do we want to continue to have former cabana owners allowed to pay for just parking places?
Well, that's why I suggested we should vote on the rebuild first and then talk about, because we could open up a whole Pandora's box with, if we don't do it. I mean, that changes that whole fee structure. So we should definitely put the $1,750 to $2,500 to the side till later in the meeting.
Why?
Because if we vote on the rebuild, then we vote on fees. If we vote against the rebuild, it's a whole new, then what? It's a whole different discussion. You're not going to charge people who don't have a cabana anymore $2,500.
We didn't last year either.
You know, there's still people, there's other cabanas down there.
It says only if
I
not
got you.
constructed.
Okay, all right. Okay, fine. All right.
But if they're not
I
constructed.
think it would affect my decision-making on fees, which there's a decision on rebuild, and whichever way that goes, I think it would affect how I think, because you're gonna have 24 fewer. So the money that comes in from them, right, there's 84 right now. Well, there were 84 2 years ago, now there's only 60. If we said no to that, I think it would affect how I would, and I haven't really thought, I honestly haven't thought through that, so.
They'd be more valuable, right?
They'd be more valuable, but we wouldn't be getting $1,750 a year from 24 people. That would be gone. Like, that's not debatable.
Like last summer.
Right, like once, right, from that summer, right. But if you look at the history, we've looked over 20 years, money's been coming
So
in
would you
from
want
that.
to, would you want to keep it at 1750 or raise it, or not?
No, I'm saying, I think we should need to decide the rebuild. I mean, do people see where I'm getting at? We've got to decide on the rebuild first, and then we can decide on the fees for the cabanas?
But as Glenna said,
seems-
the $500 fee is in there for, if we don't build it, for the previous cabana holders.
But
Why
I
would we do that?
I'm not saying yes or no we would do that. We did that last season, but maybe the 24 people wouldn't want that. I mean, I don't know but I think that we should decide on the rebuild first, and then what the fees are going to be for the either 64 or 84 cabana owners.
The beach fees are in front of us, so it's in there, so I don't know if we.
Yeah, that's binary, right? That's irrelevant whether or not we build or not.
I just think it's not to me, but, okay.
So we had those 5. I mean, we kind of had built consensus, and that's Park and Rec with the director.
So the changes would be $6 to $8 daily admission. The transferable pass for the hotel goes from $100 to $200. The cabanas from $1,750 to $2,500. The North Pavilion changing room from $600 to $700. South Pavilion lockers, residents, $300 to $350. Non-residents, $450 to $600. And
Senior pass. Right,
I
non-resident.
don't see the senior pass.
That was a
change.
recommendation for Park and Rec, the non-resident.
We didn't pick a number. We didn't pick a number.
So just so I understand, everything else stays the same? Is that what I'm hearing?
That's what the structure, the fee structure says right now.
So the $500 for parking for people who previously had a cabana would remain? Got it.
I think we should vote on each of these separately, actually. The transferable pass, I know it's 6 motions, it's not the end of the world. And then, if people are comfortable with that, instead of voting on it as a package deal. I would like to vote on each of them individually. $6 to $8 is one principle, $1,750 to $25, like, we could just do individualized motions. Is that okay with everyone?
I don't have a problem with any of it, any of those.
Yeah, I mean, we just sort of went through them. I'm sort of thinking they're all good, too.
But I'm not. So that's
So-
I'd like to do
oh, so you
individually
would like
because,
to-
right.
Because,
That's all.
Okay.
I'm not trying to be difficult, it's just I didn't,
but he's not comfortable with all of those,
Is
so
there a
that.
specific one?
yeah,
or-
I think,
But
I
that
said to
doesn't-
Steve, I just didn't think, we didn't really talk about, at length, about 300 to 350 and 450 to 600. Not to say that in 2 weeks, we might not increase those as well, but
Do you want to vote on them tonight or not?
I said I want to vote on them individually.
Tonight?
Yeah.
Okay.
But just not as a package deal. But if you guys don't want to do that, that's fine.
Are we
I don't
going to
think it's a
vote on the
difficult request.
$500 individually? Because I'm not going to support the rate, the whole fee schedule because of that.
So you want to vote them as a package?
No. The $500, the fact that cabana holders, previous cabana holders, will be allowed to pay to get parking if the units are not constructed, because I'm going to vote not to construct, in case anyone was wondering, and if the vote goes that way, I will not approve this because I don't endorse that.
So
I
then we
will
should
not-
vote on the rebuild first. That's what I started with. Right. Do you see why I wanted to do that? Because it changes. Yeah, you got to.
You just hold that item on the rebuild, on the cabana parking until you get to that item and take the others one by one if you want to move it that way.
You can just take the others in a group, right? Because that's the one that's,
Matt had an issue with the South Pavilion, so if you just go down there, raise the day rate, raise the motion.
Yeah, we can do
base.
that. We do the individually. Have any problem with that? So we'll take them one by one. Motion to approve the daily admission pass change from $6 to $8.
I'll move that motion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion
Aye.
carries.
No, nay.
4-1. The Transferable Pass Hotel changes from $100 to $200. Someone like to make that motion?
I'll move that motion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Nay.
Nay.
Motion carries 3-2. We are going to, are we going to skip the cabana or do the cabana now?
The cabana for those that remain, the constructed ones, the only piece you're going to leave apart till later is the parking for the ones that may not get reconstructed.
Okay. A motion to increase the cabana fees from $1,750 to $2,500 for the 2014 beach season. I'd like to make that motion.
So move.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Nay.
Motion carries 4-1. The North Pavilion changing room will change from $600 to $700.
I'll move that motion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Nay.
Motion carries 4-1. South Pavilion lockers, the residents, for residents, from $300 to $350.
Residents or non-residents? Read that again. Sorry.
The,
Residents, right?
did I skip the North Pavilion?
No, go ahead. No, go ahead.
South Pavilion lockers for residents increase from $300 to $350. Someone like to make that motion?
I'll move that motion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
No.
Nay.
All opposed?
Nay.
No.
3-2, the motion carries. Moving on to
South.
non-residents, South Pavilion lockers, raising the rates from $450 to $600.
I'll move that motion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Nay.
No.
Motion carries 3-2.
That
Did you
should
vote,
be it.
Glenna? I'm sorry, did you vote, Glenna?
I did, yeah.
Okay.
That should be it for now. Just come back to the parking issue once you vote on the construction or reconstruction.
We'll hold off on that issue until we move to number 16. So moving on to number 12, a motion to adopt an ordinance and amendment of Chapter 62 of the Code of Ordinances of the Town of Narragansett entitled Solid Waste.
I'll move that motion.
Second.
Discussion? Mr. Alba?
Actually, I wanted to speak on the previous things you were discussing. It seemed like you people seem to be dead against tourism. To me, tourism brings money into the area. So why discourage them from coming down here? We want to invite them. If anything, make them pay even less, because that's where our revenue comes from. But it seems like it's an age-old thing there, you know. I've heard people say, oh, we're glad when the season is over to wave goodbye to the people, the tourists are here. Well, heck, you're saying goodbye to the money that's supposed to be coming into the area. We need that money. So don't do things to discourage tourists. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries 5-0. Number 13, a motion to adopt a resolution setting annual licensing fees for commercial haulers in accordance with Chapter 62 of the Code of Ordinances.
I'll move that motion.
Second. Pam, can we have a brief description on this? Or from Dave or Jeff?
I'm going to have to defer to Mr. Osterhout. David, if you can answer this. I know I wrote down something. I know this was bid, and you're seeing the results of the bid, but other than that, Mr. Osterhout?
The agenda item is for the increase in fees.
Number 13? Yes.
Okay. There's no increase in the existing fees. There is a clarification on the residential haulers rate. We learned that some of the small residential haulers perform some commercial pickup service. The idea of offering the small haulers a low rate was not intended to catch them up in the commercial rate, which is 1,000. So we clarified the qualification for small residential haulers to include up to or less than 6 commercial accounts without being penalized of having to pay the $1,000 annual commercial rate. The second change is that in monitoring rubbish collection activities in town, we found that we also need to know who's picking up and hauling roll-off containers. So now there is a category for those commercial haulers that are just doing pickups of large roll-off containers that don't have weekly residential service customers and may not be regularly servicing a commercial business on a weekly basis. And those are the only changes.
Thank you. Thanks.
The other rates stay the same. Thanks.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries 5-0. Number 14, a motion to award the bid for beach dumpster services to the lowest bidder, Republic Services of Fall River, Allied Waste Services of Massachusetts, LLC, at their quoted bid prices of $19,650 for year one, $20,436 for year two, and at their quoted price for additional dumpsters and emergency pickup services.
I'll move that motion.
Second. Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries 5-0. Number 15, a motion to approve the purchase of one 2014 Ford Explorer K8B four-wheel drive base four-door vehicle from National Auto Fleet Group in the amount of $29,090.40.
I'll move that motion.
Second.
Discussion. Mr. McLaughlin?
Yes. This replaces the existing chief's car? This matter was
Yes, sir,
before.
it does.
This matter was before us in the budget hearing, and we eliminated it. And part of the discussion then was why we needed a SUV for transportation, when for the last 10 years, the Ford Taurus served the chief of the fire department very well. And during that discussion, I said that I would probably entertain something as for a replacement for that Taurus, but certainly no more money than that. And what I'm reading here is, I just don't understand why there's any need for this type of vehicle being operated by the chief of the fire department. And I think as a group, should deny it.
I think we did discuss this. I know Ms. Nolan wasn't there and Mr. Chief Partington wasn't there at the time, but we went through the budget process and it was part of it. And I think that the Taurus, like Doug said, did work for a number of years. I think that they have to find ways to cut costs, and this is one of them. So I agree with Doug.
Pam, what's the cost differential?
honestly, Mr. Goodrich, what was the cost differential between what was, okay, Scott? I'd like to say that I think that the fire chief has a good argument as to why it wasn't and is not working, and why he has to carry more equipment than a Taurus can handle. And I asked him to be here tonight to speak to you because I anticipated that this would be a discussion item that you probably want to have. So I hope that you will allow him
I can
to...
I assume you'd know there was going to be some discussion because we
Yes.
actually denied it at the budget session.
Yes, I did. However, I would hope you would listen to his argument. I happen to concur with him that the Taurus doesn't work that well. He is an EMA director, and he has an awful lot of equipment to carry, and right now he can't carry that equipment in the small Taurus. So I think we should listen. I hope that you will listen to it.
EMA director where? What?
For the town of
For
Narragansett.
the town?
Yeah.
Well, why isn't, I'm not saying it has to be a Ford Taurus, but why couldn't a Chevy Impala, for example, a mid-range Chevy Impala do the same type of work?
Will you listen to the new chief, is what I'm asking.
Chief, please approach.
Sure.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you for the opportunity. This vehicle is to replace the Ford Taurus, and I know that was budgeted prior to when I was here. But the vehicle that I would like to procure is a vehicle that would serve multiple functions. Part of what we do as a fire chief is to respond to scenes and operate in a command role. We have a lot of equipment we take. There are radios that we use. There are command boards, structures that we use. Part of what I anticipated doing as the future chief of the department was working more closely in that command role with the firefighters out in the field. I think it's vital. We're asking them to do many, many things that can become dangerous. And to operate that scene, you need to provide safety. And the equipment that we can bring to that scene, such as the radios, such as command board structures, such as to have immediate access to all the pre-plans that we have throughout the town via more technology. We have onboard computers that we have on the vehicles, and we hope to load a lot of that information into the vehicle and have instant access to it. It's vital, as far as my opinion is concerned, to that. That's the command role from the fire operations end of it. From the EMA end of it, a lot of what we do is to respond in all inclement weather. A lot of what we do is to establish and open up shelters. Part of what we do sometimes is have to bring some of that equipment to the shelters. Chief Carter, the last couple of storms, has had to respond in his own vehicle just to get out his own driveway and through some of the floods that have occurred. I want to make sure that I can do that. Another end of what we do is I operate as a meds pods coordinator. Part of that is any of the vaccines, the flu clinics, things like that throughout the town that we set up and help to establish requires a lot of equipment to bring to those. This vehicle will have a trailer hitch on it. I can use a trailer to load a lot of that equipment up onto that trailer and bring it to wherever I need, wherever that flu clinic is going to, or flu clinic or any other meds pod distribution will have to occur. I want to be more mobile. I want to bring my equipment with me while I'm doing that. Those are some of the things that I'm looking to do with this vehicle. The current vehicle, it's a good vehicle. You're right, it only has 80,000 miles on it. It's a 2003. It's going to be 11 years old, 12 years old. But that vehicle will still be used. It will be used for our fire alarms division to be able to do some inspections and things like that out in the field.
Excuse me, who was going to use the Taurus?
That Taurus will be allowed to be used by the fire prevention end of our department. sometimes Captain Given isn't able to do a lot of the inspections. Either he's away at meetings, or he's out on training events, or he's busy doing other things. So other inspections throughout the town have to be done, such as business inspections, smoke inspections, just regularly quarterly type inspections. So we have to bring in one of our personnel to do those inspections, and we intended to use that vehicle to do that.
Who uses the SUV that you have now? You have an SUV right now.
We have an SUV now that is used by Captain Jim Given. That was the Chevy Equinox.
And what does he do with that?
He responds to whoever he needs to respond to for that. He does his inspections. He does his investigations with that. Should he go to the fires, and he has to bring a bunch of that equipment with him as well. So he uses that vehicle.
I've seen the vehicle. I've also see what it carries. And that's another vehicle I don't think is warranted either. It's got an awful lot of room in it for what he does with it every day.
And it's those types of vehicles, I know you disagree, and I understand that, but those types of vehicles are much more functional. They allow us to operate more efficiently. Carrying that gear, opening up that hatchback and getting into all that gear and being able to slide that gear out, it's much easier to operate with. He carries fire extinguishers, fire gear, first aid kits. We'll carry an AED on board there as well.
There isn't anything in that vehicle he couldn't carry in the back of a Chevy Impala.
Well,
nothing, absolutely nothing I saw in there. Matter of fact, he'd have a lot of room left over.
I suppose you could carry it in the back of the trunk, but to get it in and out quickly and easily and not damage things and just pile it in there, I guess there is a way to store it if you so choose. But do it in an efficient manner and make it much more functional, I would have to disagree. I think it's much more difficult to do that.
Thank you.
So those are just the reasons why we're going with that style of vehicle as opposed to a sedan.
Thank you.
Scott, what is the increase between the Taurus and
the difference in cost is $6,000 from what we budgeted for. The $23,000 was in the budget originally, and the Ford Explorer is $29,000.
The original request, Matt, was up in the 30s.
We budgeted
or 23.
This is 6,000 beyond what we budgeted. That was what I wanted to get at.
Yeah. My whole point is that we don't need that vehicle. The chief of the fire department does not need that vehicle. If you had that Taurus served the chief of the fire department for the last 10 years and served him well, I understand, and it's still in pretty good condition. You don't need a four-wheel drive SUV to perform your duties and responsibilities as a fire chief, in my opinion.
Okay, you're right. It did serve him well, but I think if you had to go back and ask him what would his preference have been, what would be now, knowing what he's had to use and had to deal with, I think
if I were in his place, and Chief, if I was in your place, I would probably want a Cadillac Eldorado, But the reality is, we're trying to save money here. We're looking at another $1 million for a ladder truck down the road. We need to save our pennies, and we need to save it as best we can. And this, I don't think, is going to help your job one bit.
Well, I appreciate your opinion, but I happen to know my job and what I would feel would work more efficiently. That's where I'm heading with it. That's where I stand with it. This is an investment in the town. This past vehicle lasted 12 years, and the next one is likely going to last another 12 years. And I would like to be able to be better prepared for the next 12 years beyond me, for someone who can use this vehicle for what I believe it should be used for and how it should be used.
So can I just ask you a question, Pam? So we budgeted 23, it's 6,000 over, so it's over budget. Does it come out of the fire department's budget? Just
Before
curious. 'cause-
Don comes up, but just quickly, is this the only four-wheel drive, Chief, that you evaluated? Were there any others that were in the neighborhood of 23 that you could consider?
I did look at the smaller Chevy Equinox, just like the one that the current fire prevention officer has. The difference in price was $1,600 higher than what that vehicle was. What it
This
came in.
this was a state bid, was it not?
Yes.
Yeah.
It was-
It's a
it-
state bid. It's a very good price that we got on the state bid.
Sorry, Don, Susan.
Yeah, no, that's good. That helped too.
There are funds remaining in the purchase of the dispatch equipment that if you approve this, I would transfer from that account into this account.
Thank you.
Well,
Thank you, Don.
A lot of hands up there.
Who's
I-
first?
if I-
Mr. Brady?
Just a quick point. On the agenda, it does not say that this is a fire department vehicle. It's basically a blind item on the agenda, which somewhat concerns me. If the Taurus is a 2003, it's 10 years old, not 12 years old. But I would like to link this issue, this item on the agenda, with an item for the, I believe it was a hook and ladder truck that came before the council, I believe, a month ago. And there were two. There was a pumper, which the town was going to pay for up front, and the hook and ladder, I believe, was $1 million item, and it was going to go to bond issue, and it was voted to bring it to a bond issue. Now, 2 weeks ago, at the council meeting, and I left early, and I did not see the item on the agenda, but somehow it was switched from a bond issue to a purchase lease. Am I correct in that?
It was switched to lease purchase, but we have not approved that lease purchase as of yet. That's coming up, I assume, on an agenda at some point later on.
Oh, I totally misunderstood the vote then. Okay, thank you.
Mr. Alba?
Now, Alba, I think McLaughlin, as an ex-policeman, would have a good hands on what he's saying, so that I would go along with what he's recommending. We don't have to spend that much money. Why spend it? Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Rogers?
Hi again. I just wanted to say that it seems like bug dust. It seems like chump change. I know it's $6,000. We could have this vehicle for what, 10 years, 12 years, long time if we maintain it properly. We have such serious, overwhelmingly financial challenges in this town. And with all due respect, I think, Mr. McLaughlin, you just signed off on letting the taxpayers accrue all kinds of debt for the schools and whole bunches of other things that you may believe in principle that we can add all those millions and millions of dollars of debt. This seems like chump change. I say, let our fire chief have the truck.
Yeah, that chump change amounts to millions of dollars. The chump change that I've seen go out the door here in the year that I've been here is around $1 million, in my opinion again.
Ms. Nolan?
Yeah, what convinced me to allow the chief to ask for this vehicle and for me to agree with him? He needs a four-wheel drive. I think anybody can see the value of that. You know, in Westerly, my car, the town manager's car, was a Crown Vic. I would give anything not to have had to drive that. You can't, I mean, he needs to respond, and response time is everything. And to me, I know the amount of equipment that he has to carry. I've seen it. I've seen it in the Taurus. But I've also know that he needs a four-wheel drive. So for that reason is why, you know, I have supported the chief in this request.
Any further discussion?
Chief Carter, Chief, No,
Carter.
Chief Carter, no, I know it's Chief Partington. No, Chief Carter, though, and Chief Hoxie, when we were dealing with, in the north end, some of the problems associated with the storm last year, were very responsive. I think these kind of vehicles add to that responsiveness, so I'm glad to support it. It is $6,000 over what we budgeted, and I'm not happy to do that, obviously. We budget certain amounts. We expect that people stay within their budgets, certain department chairs stay within their budget. But, you know, we went into those budget workshops, and we were proposed by the ex-town manager, the one before you, Pam, at 3.8% was his recommended tax increase. And we went in, some of us, with lists of cutting that down to 2.2 on behalf of the taxpayers. So I think the rationale for this has been, Chief Carter advocated for this vehicle at that time. We did budget for the lower amount, thinking the Taurus was better. But if we're getting from you guys that the $6,000, again, I'm not happy to go over that budget amount, but I think that it is needed for the emergency management response, from what I've heard.
I agree as well. I mean, 23, 6,000, I agree with Mrs. Rogers. Meg, that for the 6,000, I don't really like it, but Don spoke to that, so I'm okay.
I want to act a bit more like a policymaker and give the chief his budget, which is sort of approved more at the aggregate level. I know we kind of look at things line item by line item, but do you think you can save 6,000 someplace?
Please do.
Right, you're asking us to consider it's not that much money, so I'm asking you.
Very good.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 All opposed?
Nay.
3-2, motion carries. We'll take a short break, just 5 minutes, come back at 9:15. Welcome back, everyone. Move on to the next item, number 16, a motion to award the bid for the North Beach Cabana Replacement Project to the lowest bidder, Martone Service Company, Inc., in the amount of $469,017.
I'll move that motion.
Second.
Discussion. Who wants to start?
Can I start, since I already sort of let the cat out of the bag? So I started thinking about this as a economic argument, and I think it was a month ago, we had a conversation about how we were thinking about paying for this, and Don was kind enough to remind us that we had what was, I think, a surplus in the beach fund of, remind me, $890-ish, and then the beach fund owed the town $425, and so theoretically, the beach could afford $465 or thereabouts, if I'm doing that in my head, right? So as a practical matter, $465, if the beach paid the town back the $424, it had $465 left over. We talked about at that point that Don had factored in the plan to pay back the town over time, which I was philosophically against. We didn't really talk about that. That's a policy conversation. And I think I got a lot of blowback from townspeople that they didn't necessarily want to subsidize the beach over time, that was taxpayer money and it should come back to the town quickly as was feasible, and so that the beach should be paying the town back immediately. So I took that into account, and I said, well, if we take math as it is, then the town, the beach can afford $465. Approved the bids because we wanted to see where they would come in, and lo and behold, the bid comes in $469, right? So that's, the math, and as a practical matter, you could theoretically get comfortable with that or not, given where we found ourselves after we engaged in the improvements to the North Beach Pavilion and the North Pavilion and effectively drained our beach fund and then had a hurricane and found ourselves upside down again. And so that's a risk conversation. And so I got kind of like scratched my head on that one and said, oh, well, you could conceivably rebuild it. But I think what really pushed me over the edge on making the decision not to go for this was I got more calls about it not being about the money, and people just fundamentally saying the point I made earlier. They felt, as people in the town, that we as a council were spending as much time as we were lamenting as much as we we're going to such lengths for 24 people, the haves versus the have-nots, and that they felt very much discriminated against, that for as long as they could remember, these units had been off limits, that they felt like they were some special things that they couldn't access, that they were less worthy, lower class, that it's just culturally something that, you know, it feels like less than, you know, that they just didn't have access to. And so for me, this doesn't become about money anymore, surprisingly. It becomes about not perpetuating something that just feels like it's not really supporting, it's not for the benefit of our townspeople. It's for a few people who wait on a list forever and ever and potentially get access to it after 15, 20 years. I know my father-in-law was on the list for 25 some years, and about 3 years ago actually got a phone call and said, Mr. Hagopian, you're at the top of the list. And he said, you gotta be kidding me. I'm like an old man. I don't want that thing. Go to the next person, right? And when his kids found out, they like nearly, you know, wrung his neck. But I mean, as a practical matter, I mean, the model doesn't work. Women don't wear dresses to the beach anymore and don't need to go in a changed room and change their clothes to go to the beach. That was the original premise. So for me, again, I'm pretty long-winded on this, but I had to make my point that the entitlement that has arisen, and again, no disrespect to Mr. Pryor in the audience, it has become very much that these things feel like these people's property, and if we perpetuate it by rebuilding them, I'm afraid that we're doing a great disservice to the rest of the people in the town. That's my position.
So, surprisingly enough, I'm just at the other end, spending a lot of time down at the beach. There is, as they phrased it, a cabana community. There are people that you and I know that live in this town, whether they go away for a couple of months, they're residents that live in the town, they're ordinary people, they're not the haves and the have-nots, they're people that go down there and watch the fireworks and invite others along the beach. I don't rent a cabana, but I'm in the North Pavilion, and I go down, and all of those people I see all over town. So for me, you know, the money works, the numbers work. The finance director said we have the money to do it. The only reason we're at a loss is because of the hurricane. So for me, when you have real estate on the beach, you rebuild it because eventually you make the revenue back. So it's worthy of that. That's what they do all along the coast. In New Jersey, things go down because of a hurricane, but they're not afraid to rebuild. They rebuild to make the revenue back. So over time, we'll do that. So for me, you know, it's like Bonnet Beach Club, it's like the town beach. There's a community of people, and I don't think they're any different than you and I. I mean, I have spent many a time down there. So for me, I think it's a have to in the town. I think it's been an opportunity for people to enjoy, just as they do in other areas of the town. So for me, I completely support the cabanas, although I'm not on the list. I don't have one. I don't plan on getting one. I support it because I've been down there summer after summer, and I've seen the people that have enjoyed that piece of Narragansett, and it's just one piece. It's just like the Bonnet people. They enjoy their beach, and even though that's private and this is a public beach, everybody has been afforded the opportunity of quality of life in Narragansett, whether it's Galilee Beach Club, the town beach. So I don't want to start taking that away from people, because I think, again, that's what makes this town so wonderful. So I wholeheartedly support it, and doing the math, it makes me happy that we can pay it back over time.
Sure.
Yep, go.
You know, this came up in the budget workshops. I think everyone's relatively now familiar with the history. You know, I anticipated that we would probably do the rebuild this upcoming year. I think people in town have different expectations when they come to the town. I don't think everybody has the same expectation of what they're going to get out of the town. I think some people, if they've been a long-standing family that's had a cabana down there, that they got a cabana before there was a wait list, many of them. So if you moved in 2 or 3 years ago and you have an expectation of a cabana, it's a silly expectation. So, and I have certain expectations in the town, but you know, there's some things that were built after I was, you know, born. So I just think that, I just want to get that out there, because we, in any kind of policymaking role, not everybody, you do your best to treat everybody as equally as you can, but different people have different things that they value and that they like. I think there's a stability that comes with what's going on at the town beach. Bonnet's come up a lot tonight, so I think people know that I go to Bonnet and spend more time there than I do at the Narragansett Town Beach. But I do think there's a stability associated with long-standing people having these cabanas for a long time. And Glenna talks, it's not a property interest, and maybe these people shouldn't treat it as such, but I think if they do, they might respect that property a little bit more than if we rotated people in or out into it. I also look at the amount of money that we're going to spend on it. So 284 comes in, I think, Jeff, 284 comes in from the trust for the, after the, so $284,000 comes in from the trust because of the Sandy destruction. That's an insurance revenue. Then we have a bid amount to go out for 469. So we're going to pay 469. 284 comes out, 469. 284 comes in, 469 goes out, and then we have a payback period of 10 years, but it's going to be a little lower now with this, because this estimate of 469, the original estimate there was 685. Not to get lost in the numbers, it comes down to, you know, if we're a beach community, do you want to have these kind of cabanas? Do you want to have this kind of asset? If we upset the apple cart and get rid of it, you know, I go back to it, like I said, I want to protect and preserve the things that people like, and I feel like I'm taking something away from people is what I feel like I'm being asked to do. But, you know, if the times have changed and the values have shifted, and maybe that's what the council feels, they want to go that route, but I would like to see, I would support the rebuild for the reasons I stated.
I think right now, with all of our issues in town, these cabanas are simply not a priority. Further, I think the entire cabana design is poorly devised in policy and plan. I think the cabanas that are there now were established or designed in 1950 with that U facing the beach. Mr. Brady submitted a plan a few years ago and resubmitted it to us, I think, this week or last week. And to me, his plan is far more well-considered and thought out. Replacing these cabanas would simply be a replacement of a poorly devised and inefficient plan. This may be an opportunity to rethink the entire placement and number of cabanas in their entirety. It could provide for more options for more people, and in turn, more profit for the town. But that's probably for a long-term strategy, which I think Glenna addressed this today, and that's something we have to consider in the future as well. But the reason that I have the biggest issue with these cabanas is the policy, like Ms. Agopian mentioned. No man, woman, child, family should be allowed to have these cabanas for perpetuity. There's no fairness in that, and continue this would just move a flawed tradition further. A lottery system for a 3-year term makes more sense. To allow one family to have these properties for years, decades, and generations, public property, is patently unfair and undemocratic. So, for the design strategy reason, the fairness reason, and for the financial priority, I don't support it.
Well, almost everybody knows where I stand on it from the beginning, and not for all the reasons stated, but the ecology of the beach I'm very concerned about. I don't really think rebuilding that cabana there is in the best interest for the overall health of the beach itself. And I think it would look much nicer without, and I think it looks much nicer without it, the cabana being there. The other part of it is the money. We were talking about $700,000, we'll say $500,000 for argument now. And the payback, I don't know, 7, 10 years, it really doesn't make any difference because within 7, 10 years, you're gonna have to put a new roof on it, maintain it and everything else. And we're dedicating tax dollars to that project for 29 tenants. And the risk that we're taking, overall risk that we're taking that could be destroyed by a hurricane or storms, I don't think it's worth it. And that's why I think it's a very, very poor investment for the town, and we really should be thinking in some other direction as to, even the existing cabanas that are there, we ought to think about their value too, for the overall value to the town.
Mr. Alba.
Al Alba, as a former property owner, I got to agree with Susan Bonanno. It's a good investment. That's all it boils down to. And if it's going to make money for the town, I'm all for it. So if a hurricane comes, we have insurance. That would take care of it. But definitely we should rebuild them. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Beatty?
Well, first I'd like to say I understand Susan and Matt's desire to have the cabanas. I'm pro-cabana myself. I don't think where they are now is the correct place. But when you say you want to rebuild them in that location, you have to accept the fact that its twin to the south of the U suffered severe damage in Sandy, that L sticking out into the beach. All the stairs were washed away, part of the foundation washed away, the ramp up to the building level was washed away. If you do rebuild these and you say, well, it's a 10-year payback time, yeah, that's if they are there 10 years from now. I suggest to you that they won't be there 10 years from now. At least 50% of those L units are going to be gone. And you're going to have to face the same issue again, borrowing money to build them again in the wrong location. You know, historically, we've made an awful lot of mistakes in the beach in the last 10 years. We rebuilt and remodeled the community center, the North Pavilion Community Center. We did not jack it up 3 or 4 feet up to the elevation of the cabanas, which we should have done. So that's at risk, and it should not be at risk. Long term, it's at risk. 2 years ago, we began the North Pavilion, supposedly for $2 million. We did not jack it up 3 or 4 feet, which we should have done. The only reason we were allowed to build it because it was grandfathered in. So that was a long-term mistake for this town. We need to stop making those mistakes. So I'm asking that the town not rebuild it in this location, at least. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Vangermish.
Yeah, I don't want to go over that song again. Yes, we have no cabanas. But that is just indicative of the same issue. If anything should make any sense would be to say, yes, I don't think we have enough information here to make a long-term decision. It is time we got the information we need to make long-term decisions. What this is clearly a long-term decision with all sorts of social and economic factors. And to me, I agree with Doug. I think this is perhaps too risky, but I'm not an ecologist, but I do know we need a committee here to look at the beach as if we were the Bonnet Shores Beach Club or the Galilee Beach Club, if there's a Galilee Beach Club, because these people must use some long-term thinking and some long-term planning. We've got to do this. So to me, I would say, yes, we have no cabanas this year, and until we develop a rational, long-term, safe plan for how we want to use our beach, let's do it. Let's get a committee together. We have interested people who know a great deal, and I'm not one of them, about ecology and the ocean level. But clearly, we need a long-term committee to conserve our beach. And this should be the next motion that follows this particular motion.
Mr. Miller?
Curiously, I noticed in the paper this morning that this is the birthday of George Santayana, who was born, I think, about 1863. He was the man that said, "Who fails to learn from history is doomed to repeat it." Now, I remember about 25 years ago, there was a different Callahan involved here at the time, but the town manager was a man named Matarese. And Matarese took on what was then known as the Canachet Club, which was a town-owned facility masquerading as a private institution. And I think it speaks to what you said, Glenn, and I think Jim has, and a few of the others, that I think for certain financial reasons, the project doesn't make any sense to me. But aside from that, the social considerations that Richard Vangermich just spoke of come into play as well. I agree that this is a town-owned property that should be run as a business.
Thank you. Mr. Chorney? Mr. Wojciechowski?
I've read that by the year 2100, we're going to be 5 feet higher. Water will be higher out there. So we've got a problem coming. You know, I'm not going to be here, but progressively we'll have more and more water out. We're in trouble down there. Then, of course, you look at wetlands. We're not allowed to build on wetlands. People can't build on wetlands. Well, this is the most important wetland that I can ever think of. Why are we considering building on the most valuable piece of wetland in this town is beyond me. It should be against the law to build on this wetland. If any wetland is precious, no building on this wetland. The other issue is the South Beach is gone, almost gone. So obviously, we're going to have to move the whole beach operation north. It's coming. You see out there during the storms, and you can see it's gone. So the plan is, again, strategic plan has to be, hey, listen, that South Beach is going to go, we're going to move. So we need 2 beaches, we're going to have to move right where that cabana is, and that's where the future beach people are going to go. From the south, they're going to go north. We need that going forward. We got the money. No, we don't have the money. Give that money back to the taxpayers. You know, we got this $400,000 out there. Just because we got this we found this $400,000, we're going to spend it. Well, there's reasons why we shouldn't. Very good reason why we shouldn't. And we got reasons to use this money. Give it back to the taxpayer. Okay, taxes, in lieu of taxes. That's a valuable piece of property, and I'd like you to value it at its real value and see what the tax really should be, or tax in lieu. That money, these monies, go back to the taxpayer. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Pryor?
I think you have the wrong idea about the people who lease the cabanas. They're not elitist people. They don't feel proprietary ownership of the cabanas. They're people that really love the beach and have continued to love it. The best time down there is probably from after Labor Day till October 15th. I'll use it then anyway, whether you rebuild them or not. I can see where this is going, but I just don't like the reasons. It's not elitist. The reason it's perpetual people, it's the people that want it. I don't want to play tennis, so I don't play tennis. Plus, I'm a little too old. But just don't get the wrong reasons. Thank you.
Thank you.
And Mr. Pryor, again, it's not necessarily the 5 people here. Unfortunately, it's a perception issue. And that's unfortunately what we struggle with.
I understand.
Yeah, I'm uncomfortable with those reasons too, so I agree with Mr. Pryor. And Doug and others in the audience have made a good point about the beach erosion issue. And it's really a matter of, do you think we had Hurricane Bob, Hurricane Sandy, which are about the same magnitude, 20 years apart, and then we've had like Gloria and Irene, which were lower scale, and it's a matter, do you think you're getting Sandy in 2 years? I mean, part of the decision making to deal with Doug's concern is, do you think Sandy's coming in 2 years, or do you think they're 20 years apart? And maybe we should get those ecology experts to give us odds on that, because that would help us. That would help us make that decision. But we are a beach community, so there's different rationales going on, but I do want to emphasize, I'm glad Mr. Pryor brought that point up.
Without any further hands or apparent discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Nay.
Nay.
Motion fails 3-2. We also have to consider the $500 parking right of the people who do not have built cabanas, to continue the policy we set last year to the 2014 season. Someone like to make that motion?
So move.
Second. I do think we should continue the $500 fee because we haven't changed the policy in total for the cabanas, at least for this year. And I think it does raise some revenue. And further, I don't know what we'd do with the parking spots that are potentially empty. I don't think that we can make a policy right now that would allow people to get in there for the right price and also make it make sense. So that's why I'd support that.
You need a second on that.
He seconded it.
I second.
Oh, okay. Very good. Anybody else have anything to say?
I mean, it's a continuation. Instead, we're going to have to like reconfigure the whole thing. I mean, I'm not saying it's the policy forever and ever, but I think for clarity for the 24 people, we voted on the other things. That's my rationale. It's more, it's a 1-year thing. Now it's a 2-year. And then next, as you said, if
Right.
you're going to have a holistic view, but
I think it should
otherwise
be-
I don't know what to do.
Right, I think it should be a lottery system going forward, but I don't think we'll establish that by the time the beach season comes up. So that's why I support the continuation of the policy from last year.
Now, what are we voting on? The 2,400 going from 1,700 to what, 20?
No,
We already
just the
did.
$500.
Just the $500.
Just the $500 one?
And how many passes is that?
24 cabanas, 2 parking passes, and 4, is that correct?
So it's 6 passes for 24. And am I correct in assuming they're not just limited to that parking lot?
No, they are, aren't they? Are they the cabana holder people that, I think they are. It's like a
Basically, they have all the rights and privileges as a cabana leasee, other than not having a cabana. So they'd get the 2 hang tags, the six entrance passes, which one of them is transferable, and so one vehicle gets the reserved parking spot. The other one, first come, first serve against the street side parking. If not, they'd go into the north lot. So again, same parking privileges as any other cabana holder.
So they do go into the north lot?
Exactly.
The north lot or the cabana lot?
Again, first come, first serve in the cabana lot, and then the overflow would be in the north lot.
Yeah, so they
For
go
the
to the
second
cabana
pass.
first,
Yep.
and if it's full, then they go to the north, but.
They get 2 hang
priv-
tags. The first one is a reserved spot, numbered spot. The second one would be the overflow.
So you could have 2 cars,
Yep.
one in the cabana lot, one in the north lot.
That's correct.
And the cabanas that are not there, they have reserved spots, is that correct?
Yes,
Reserved.
that's correct, yep.
Mr. Gopin, you thinking about banning that, or are you thinking about raising it because you raised the prices? That didn't come to me until just a minute
Banning
ago.
it.
Banning it?
I just think we have a parking problem, and where you've got potentially 24 spots in the north lot that are being paid for by cabana people.
So you just open those 24 spots up to everybody through passes? Mr. Brady?
I hate to be a pain, but I think you might have a legal issue if you issue these 24 parking places. I mean, you voted that you're not going to have these 24 cabanas. Once you issue that $500 parking place, after you have voted no cabanas, I think they might have a legal recourse in the courts that you must build those cabanas for them. I think you need a legal opinion on that before you go much further, but anyway, that's my opinion.
It's a problem with the whole vote we just had, is it opens up a lot of Pandora's boxes.
I'm not sure that I would concur with Mr. Brady's opinion. I mean, anyone can sue us for anything, but I think you need to rethink what is included in that, how is it described. Last year it was described as a temporary replacement for the cabanas that were not rebuilt for last season. If you're still saying that you might consider an alternate plan next year to rebuild those, that might fly again, but I think you need to redefine what that $500 buys you if you're going to keep it in the fee schedule. And could I make a suggestion that maybe we can hold that one particular item for next night so Steve and I and Pam can speak about what makes sense for that $500? I mean, that's a one discrete item. It's not going to screw up the advertising or the booklet. It shouldn't, I don't think.
So to withdraw the second. Oh,
Yeah.
oh, do you want to?
We could,
No, I think that's a very smart move.
yeah, we could continue the motion to the
Yeah,
next meeting.
so I'll withdraw that, and then whoever seconded.
Motion
I
continue the
withdraw
next
my
meeting?
motion.
And I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Moving
Yeah, 'cause
on
it was-
to number 17. A motion to reappoint Richard Vangermeesh and Mark D. Abrahams to the Finance Committee for 4-year terms, which will expire on December 1st, 2017.
I'll move that motion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries 5-0. Number 18, a motion to approve the settlement for $75,000 in the matter of Denise DeCoperal versus the Zoning Board of Review of the Town of Narragansett.
Move that motion.
Second.
Mr. McSally, you can just
Sure.
explain the...
Kind of a quick overview, and we've talked about this in executive session a number of times. The matter involves a piece of real estate that the owners attempted to build on, went to the zoning board for relief back in 2008. Zoning board denied it due to the presence of significant wetlands. The owners appealed to the Superior Court. Superior Court upheld the denial by the zoning board. Owners then exercised their rights, which few do, there's not a lot of case law on it, to claim that the town condemned or inversely condemned the property due to its wetlands regulations. That theory does exist. South Kingstown, a number of years ago, set the pace with a case on a barrier beach where they had a regulation denying the buildability, and the courts did adopt in Rhode Island the theory of inverse condemnation, entitling an owner to compensation if they could establish certain things. We've been in court for over a year or so. We've had summary judgment proceeding where the plaintiffs attempted to have judgment on liability established without a trial. That was defeated with a trial date now set for late February. Trial expenses, we've told you, we have to hire a wetlands biologist, and we have to hire an engineer, and we have to hire an appraiser. Trial expenses were anywhere from estimate $25,000 to $50,000. Their appraised value of the lot was $115,000 to $125,000 as a buildable lot. The interest factor is about 60% to 70% based upon their judgment interest, which we've seen before. Given all those factors, the court ordered us to mediation. We had settlement week last week in Providence where all the pending cases were mediated, and James and myself attended. And we with a mediator, came to a resolution of $75,000, which is below what we discussed as the potential authority or liability, and the recommendation is settlement. Judge Gibney is holding the stipulation until there's a formal vote to approve it.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries 5-0. Number 19, a motion to discuss the use of highway department equipment and the application of rental equipment.
I'll move that motion.
Second,
Second?
Mr. McLaughlin?
Thank you. I read the Director of Public Works report on the Bobcat project in Eastwood Look. I believe that's where it was. I was wondering how that worked out. And I also had a question about that Bobcat rental as it applied to wastewater thing. I was wondering how successful that project was. I have 3 parts to this query here.
I think in my report, I tried to identify the work completed by the rented machine, since there was some discussion at the council meeting where that rental was actually approved. There were 3 projects done with the use of the rented machine. The first project that comes to mind was approximately 3 weeks worth of grinding stumps from the last 3 major storm events where we've had to remove trees from public streets, and still had the stumps to grind or remove in some fashion so they don't become an eyesore in the future. The second project, and the primary reason for needing a tracked machine as opposed to a wheeled machine, was the replacement of the top 3 to 4 inches of sand on the Edgewater stormwater quality facility, which is a sand filter. While you could drive on the contaminated sand because of the organic matter and soil fines and some actual growth of vegetation, you could not drive on the sand base with a rubber-tired machine. So the rented Bobcat with the tracks was used to install the new sand and smooth it. It worked out very good for that. Because we had completed the 2 prior projects, which were the main reason why we rented the machine, and we had it for a 1-month rental rate, we used it for 2 or 3 days on some stormwater easement brush clearing projects, one of which was a combined stormwater and sewer easement between Eastward Look and the West Wind condominiums.
That's the one you mentioned in your report.
Yes, and that particular project has been overgrown and inaccessible by both our storm drain cleaning equipment and the wastewater department's jet spray unit that they use for cleaning sewer pipes. And so we did not complete the entire easement. I think we got about 50% of it done. We did one other small project that is a storm drain swale, very large one, adjacent to Angel Road, in between Angel Road and Eastward Look, which the town spent a significant amount of money reestablishing probably about 10 years or so ago. And we did the maintenance work that was long overdue to keep that in good functional form.
Thank you. I have a question. A year ago, more than a year ago, and I've mentioned it to you, Pam, since you came on board, about the leaf vacuum cleaner piece of equipment that was stored for 1.5 years, almost 2 years, in the recreation department's parking in their garage at their barn. And I mentioned it to you that there was a piece of equipment, the information I have, that it was a piece of equipment that after it was purchased, the town had no use for it, and in fact never used it. Can you tell me where that is now, and what is the story with that? Do you think that if we don't have a use for it, that we should be selling it or making a move on it some year after I initially brought it up to the acting town manager?
I'm going to have to defer to staff, if you give me just a
That's fine.
minute. Is it in Mr. Osterhout, or is it Mr. Wright that I should, Mr. Osterhout, would you please come up? Can you answer that?
It's a good question, and I'm not sure I made any reference to it in my monthly report.
No, it has nothing to do with the monthly report.
Okay.
Nor does the next question I have after this.
All right, so the leaf vac unit is a collection device for cleaning up bulk quantities of leaves, and it's actually similar to some of the landscape contractors' units, but possibly a little bigger because it's really designed for municipal use along roadways. It was used to clean up leaf debris accumulations along all of the heavily treed roads in the town of Narragansett this past fall. And I can state unequivocally that it brought much more efficiency to that process of removing the leaves so that they don't linger all winter long, and prevents the call-ins during heavy rain events where leaf debris floats over the storm drain grates and causes localized flooding throughout town. So, for example, it was used in Pettaquamscut Lake Shores. It was used in Mettatuxet. It was used in portions of Edgewater. It was used in the entire Pier Village area and portions of Harbor Island, which have large populations of very mature oak trees. So it was used for approximately 2.5 weeks, and in that 2.5 weeks, it accomplished what we've never been able to accomplish before.
Then that's the 2.5 weeks. Why was it parked in the garage for 1.5 years without any use? A brand-new piece of equipment.
Originally, it was envisioned when it was purchased as a tool for both parks and public works to use. It did not get used during the last fall season, and I really can't explain why. There really is no good reason for that, probably because Parks had possession of it. I didn't think about it. And then when the subject came up with Mr. Kerbel, I indicated that if Parks didn't want to use it, Public Works could make good use of it. And we immediately made plans to use it this fall season. We did. We were very happy with what it allowed us to do. And I'll give you an example of why. That machine, besides picking up the leaves, shreds them. It reduces the volume. In the past, we've used the street sweepers. Picture going out there with a broom and a dustpan. That's what a street sweeper is. It's mechanized for sure, but it doesn't shred leaves. So we were tickled pink. We've never had anything like that, and we probably wouldn't be anywhere near close to having the leaves picked up around town if we had continued to do it the way we did it in past years. So
That is
I hope that
good
answers your
news.
question.
That's good news.
Because the option
The
would
only
have
thing
been
that
to-
I have the problem with, and I guess you can understand it, is why we had to have a piece of equipment like that to park in the garage for 1.5 years, nearly 2 years.
Yeah, and
I don't get
I
that one at all.
apologize. It's an
No,
error on the staff's part.
I know. Just one other question here. If the Recreation Department, or Parks Department, doesn't have a pickup truck, their pickup trucks are down because of service, is there any reason why the Highway Department can't let them use one of their pickup trucks until their truck is back in service again? Because I know personally, from my personal observations and tours of that Highway Department, there are plenty of vehicles down there for use. And I can't understand why the Highway Department couldn't free up a couple of vehicles when that Parks Department needs it. And I hope we're not having that kind of a push and pull type thing between two departments there. And maybe rather than have any explanation or any talk about it now, maybe it's something you need to address. And maybe you can handle that.
It would be hard for me to address right now,
I know.
Mr. McLaughlin.
No, I
so
know.
I would like some time, because obviously, if there are extras at, I don't know, I'm going to have to sit
I have
down.
one other point, and I'm going to be quiet so everybody can go home. One more point. I received an email from a client, I don't know whether the rest of the council members have received it too, about a particular building permit issue on Great Island. And it was forwarded to me, and the person who, from one of the citizens, and the person who referred it to me said that they were told by an employee of the building office to call your councilman if you had any questions about a particular permit. And I forwarded that copy to you, and you responded to me on that. I don't think, to be honest with you, I don't think any town employee should be calling me. I should be telling the citizens to call their councilman if they can find the answer to the problem. And I'm not singling anybody out, but they should be a little more conscious of that. If a person standing in any one of our offices, our public offices, and ask if they have a legitimate question, somebody should try to answer that question. And it isn't, the answer to it isn't referring it to the town council.
You are correct, sir.
Thank you very much.
Dave, thank you for the work on the roads, though, this last weekend. Appreciate it. And good luck tomorrow.
That concludes the regular agenda. A motion to retire to executive session at the end of the December 16th, 2013 Town Council meeting, as in accordance with 42-46-4, to discuss litigation, Kayak Center at Whitford Cove, doing business as Kayak Center of Rhode Island versus Town of Narragansett et al. In accordance with Rhode Island General Laws 42-46-5A2, and appoint Mark A. McSally, Town Solicitor Clerk Pro Tem. Somebody can make that motion.
I'll make that motion.
Second?
All in favor, Ms. Segopian?
Aye.
Mr. McLaughlin?
Aye.
Mr. Callahan, aye. Ms. Bonanno?
Aye.
Mr. Mannix?
Aye.
Have a good night.